So everybody, welcome to this open forum concerning the FY21 budget. We're kind of going to give everyone an overview of some of the things that have been going on and, what has been posted in the warrant and what has been newly recommended by the both Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. So to start, I'm just going to kind of go over what departments are included in what categories. So in the budget documents and in the annual town meeting warrant, you see categories of general government, public safety, Silver Lake assessment, education, public works, health and human services, culture and recreation, debt service, employee benefits, and insurance. So what makes up general government? There's 25 departments that make that up. Moderator, selectmen, finance committee, reserve fund, capital planning committee, accounting, assessing, revaluation, treasurer, collector, legal services, wage and personnel board, human resources, information technology, tax title, town clerk, election and registration, conservation, planning, zoning board of appeals, rent control board, green committee, agricultural commission, general operations, and facilities. For public safety, there are 6 departments: police, fire, inspections, sealer of weights and measures, animal control, and harbor master. The Silver Lake assessment just has that one. Education has the local schools, KES and KIS, special education, and vocational education. Public Works has streets, trees, and parks, snow and ice, street lighting, solid waste, and non-town net metering. This actually is its own separate. Health and Human Services has Board of Health, Council on Aging, Veterans, Commission on Disability. Culture and Recreation has Library, the Adams Center, Recreation, Historic Commission, Historic District, and the Cooperative Extension Service. Debt Service just has the debt. Employee Benefits is just that one department. And insurance is just the general, is liability insurance. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the variances from what was posted in the annual town meeting warrant and what was newly recommended. I've asked the town clerk to post on the website a document that shows specifically what those changes were. And the total of the changes are an increase from the annual town meeting warrant of $338,036. $299,903 of that is the Silver Lake assessment. So what we're really dealing with is an increase of $38,000 between all the other categories. With general government, that increased by $17,071. Public safety decreased by $16,738. Public works increased by $75,311. Human services increased by $28,021. And culture and recreation increased by $57,779. Employee benefits decreased by $123,311. So that makes up the whole of the $338,000. The differences are mostly due to the fact that there were several iterations of a reorganization plan. And, this is the final. It reflects several positions. Originally, the annual town meeting warrant had us budgeting for another assistant assessor. This new one does not. It has us budgeting for an administrative assessor. We had to increase the collectors by roughly $30,000 due to the fact of our existing collector resigning and us having to hire a consultant. There's detail in each of the categories. I can certainly go through the detail if anybody wants me to, but it is on the website. If anybody has questions concerning, each of the bullet points on them, I can certainly go into detail on that. But for the most part, what was approved is a budget inclusive of Silver Lake of $48,786,877. Exclusive of it, we're looking at $37,791,882. Silver Lake assessment is based on their March 10th vote, which is $10,994,995, which does not include any reduction whatsoever due to COVID. That's really, in a nutshell, the differences between, what you were originally been given and what the boards have voted. Now, Carl, I think I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of talk about probably between FY20 and FY21.
Okay, thank you, Carol. What I've done is I've tried to look at a kind of a macro approach here and look at some of the large numbers. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the comparison of Kingston's operating budgets over the last few years with surrounding towns, and talk a little bit about what I see as the strength of Kingston's financial management, financial resources, the conservatism of the way we do our budgets, etc. The first thing I'll say is that when we look at the FY21 budget that you're going to be asked to vote for at town meeting, the bottom line, as Carol indicated, of $48,787,000 is actually less than about $650,000 less than the fiscal budget that we had for the current or the fiscal year of 2020, which ended June 30th. What is important to me, as much as that net bottom line, is that if we look at what I call our total departments, the general government departments that Carol mentioned, the police and fire, the schools, the public works, etc., we have an increase of $715,000, which is 1.6%. The retirement of debt is down by $1.4 million, so that's what gets us to our bottom line reduction of $650,000. The reduction in debt is because the bonds that we used to finance the intermediate school 20 years ago have been paid off, so we no longer have that piece of debt that we've had to pay on. The other thing that I find interesting when I compare FY21 with FY20 is the relative changes between the various functions. So as an example, general government increased only 2%. Public safety is actually down 1.9%. Education is up 2.3%. Public works is down 2.2%. Health and human services is down 17%. That's because of some of the reductions that have happened in the way those functions are being carried out. For instance, we don't have a full-time veterans agent. We're not going to have a full-time Board of Health agent. The culture and recreation are also down significantly because in some of the reductions that had to be made because of the COVID-19 issues, we've had to significantly reduce the library budget especially. The other thing that I like to look at is how do these functions make up the total budget? Well, education, as we all know, is always the big driver of local budgets. The education budget is 55% of our total departmental budget. The public safety is almost 15%. So between those two, public safety, police and fire, education, our schools, we're talking 70%. So when people have come to me in prior years, concerned about the budgets and looking for budget reductions, one of the things I always point out, where do you want to make reductions? And generally, there's a real reluctance to make reductions in education and police and fire. Well, that's 70% of your budget. Then you have another 14% that are employee benefits, basically the pension and the medical insurance that we pay for everybody, including our local teachers and our police and fire. So there you're looking at almost 85% of your budget as being police, fire, schools. So that's kind of my general look at the FY21 budget versus FY21 and how it breaks out. The next thing I looked at is I like to look at comparative analyses among towns. So what I've done is I've taken 15 towns, including 15 towns in Plymouth County that have populations between 8,000 and about 18,000, close to 19,000, with Kingston at 14,000 or so, right in the middle. And what we see there is that we can do a calculation on what operating budget expense is per capita, per person. And so that kind of gives you a comparison of what it costs between or among towns. And that analysis shows that Whitman, for example, is the low at $2,500 per person. The high one is Norwell at $5,500. Where is Kingston? Kingston is at $3,800 per person with a basically $52 million operating budget and 14,000 or so population. So $3,800 for Kingston, and the average is $3,900. So of the 15 towns in Plymouth County, most like Kingston, Kingston is right near the average, so that we pay more taxes than half the towns, and we pay less taxes than half the towns. Another thing that I like to look at comparing towns are the education budgets. Again, the most the highest expense item. We have education budgets that range from from a low of 37%, actually 36% of the budget in Hull is for education. Well, that makes some sense. Hull tends to have a lot of summer residents and senior residents that don't use the school system. The one that has the highest percentage is looks like Lakeville is at 52%. Pembroke is at 50%. From this matrix, this is done a little bit different. These numbers I'm talking come right off of the state of Massachusetts Department of Revenue website. So they accumulate the numbers a little bit different, include things that we might not, but they show Kingston as being 47%. So again, I look at the average for education across the towns, and it's an average of 44% for the 15 towns, with Kingston being at 47%. In my opinion, that is somewhat of a good sign that the cost of education in Kingston is a little bit higher, but it shows that we're paying money for our students. And I think that 90% of us would acknowledge that the most important financial function of local government is education for the children. I did the same thing, taking a quick look at the fire and police budgets across the communities. The average for all of the communities is 11% of the budget goes to police and fire. Kingston pays 13%, so we're a little bit higher there. There's not a lot of range in this one. Carver is at 7%. I believe Carver still has a volunteer fire department, or at least a good part of the fire department in Carver are volunteers. The high one is Whitman. Whitman probably has to have a bigger police force living next door to Brockton. So again, that's just an indication that, to me, says that Kingston is paying about what you would expect for police, fire, and education when you compare us to surrounding communities. The next thing I take a look at is our so-called excess levy capacity. When we figure out the taxes on individual homeowners, you all know that basically your taxes can increase 2.5% per year without an override. You have growth that you build new houses, you add additions onto houses, you can tax, that increases your tax base. And the long and short of it, you get to a point where your real estate tax needs to cover a lot of your expenses. And what I have done when I was on the finance committee and the people before me, we try to not tax every last dollar, so that there's always been an objective in the financial community here in Kingston to say that if we can tax, pick a number, $32 million to the residential tax people, we would like to leave somewhere minimum of $1 million on the table, saying we're not going to tax that $1 million. Well, if I go back to 2014, we have left on the table anywhere from from $854,000 to $1,897,000, all $897,000, almost $2 million. So that's my way of saying that, hey, we are not taxing as much as we could. We're trying to maintain a reasonable tax rate, trying to keep expenditures under control so that we don't have to get into that levy all the way. Now, this year, being an exceptional year, we had hoped to have a excess levy capacity of somewhere between $500,000 and $750,000. You heard me say that I'd like to see $1 million there every year. When we get into the issues of reduced revenues, added expenses because of this pandemic, I think it was generally accepted across the state of Massachusetts that communities would not be able to have the excess capacity that they'd like. We were targeting the 500 to 750K, and that was partly how we got started on having to make some reductions. Now, one of the things that community town meeting voters are going to be faced with is, as Carol said, you're going to be asked to vote for a general budget for the town, including local schools. Those local schools made a budget cut of $300,000 to try to help us get to a reasonable budget considering what we expect to have from the reduced state aid, basically. And I should say that $300,000 reduction was less than 2%. That sometimes when you hear a number of 300,000 coming away from schools, you say, "Oh my God." Well, our local school budgets, including special education, is almost $14 million. So, when you talk 300,000, you're talking something right around 2%. At the same time, as Carol said, we took reductions of around 600,000 from other local community, local departments. So that's why we're looking to have this budget approved at that level where $900,000 has been taken out. We were looking to have another $300,000 taken out of the assessment that we get from Silver Lake. Silver Lake has they voted the budget that they felt they needed. They have stuck with that budget, waiting to get better information on what their state aid is going to be, what other revenues may be, so that we have broken the budgets out so that town meeting will be asked to vote that one separately, and that's where the decision is going to be difficult. Do you support I like rounding numbers, the $11 million budget that Silver Lake has requested? If that budget is supported, then you're down to the $250K or so of excess levy capacity, which is not the conservatism that I like to see as a financial manager. However, this is an extraordinary year. So that's something that the town meeting is going to have to decide. Do they want to bounce it back to Silver Lake to do another budget? Or do they accept that, hey, this is what we're going to pay for education this year? I should mention that Plimpton has already approved the school budget, their assessment, the way Silver Lake has sent it out. So now if either Halifax or Kingston approves the assessment, then it's a done deal that only two of our towns have to approve it, and then the third town has to accept it. Again, that's a general comment about the tax levy over the years, the excess, what we are striving for this year. It over the years for Kingston, it's ranged, anywhere from a low of about 2.5% to a high of over 6% of the total levy itself. So that you can see we try to be somewhat conservative there. Another important consideration when we talk about the affordability of our tax bills, you look at one way of doing that is looking at the average home value versus the average tax bill. So that if you have in 2020, the fiscal year that just ended, the average home value was $427,000 in Kingston. The average tax bill was $6,900. That equates to a 1.6%. So that you're paying 1.6% of your home value in real estate taxes. And in Kingston, that has been very consistent. I looked at the last 9 years, and I estimated 2021, and we're right at 1.6 to 1.7%. That brings me into my next thing. I say, okay, let's look at that across the 15 communities in Plymouth County. And you see the same thing, that if you live in Situate, your home value is $602,000, so it's very high. Your tax bill of $8,100 is 1.3%. So you're seeing a low there, what you would expect in a more wealthy community like Situate. You look at Kingston there, and I said we're at the 1.6%. Well, when I take the 15 communities, the average percent of tax bill to average home value is exactly 1.6%. So the theory is always that if you can afford a $600,000 home in Situate, you can probably afford a higher tax bill than if you can only afford a $330,000 house in Whitman. But what you'll see, and I've got the facts right in front of me for Plymouth County, is 1.5, 1.6, 1.7%. And I can tell you in studies I've done previously, that's true across Massachusetts. I don't care where you live in Massachusetts, your ratio of taxes paid for real estate to the value of your home is going to be somewhere between 1.4 and 1.8%. There's not a lot of variance. You go to some of the far west, very small communities that have very, very limited services. Their home values are pretty low. You may see some that are down closer to 1%. You go to some of the wealthier communities that provide more services than in most communities, and you may see closer to 2%. So again, that's kind of trying to look at the affordability, trying to look at, comparisons, trying to make sure that, hey, when we hear how expensive the taxes are in Kingston, I challenge people to understand that they're expensive everywhere, and the data proves it. The next item I have is looking at free cash. Free cash is a misnomer that most people don't understand, but what it really represents is when we budget $3 million for the police department and we end up spending $2,900,000, $100,000 of that is going to become quote unquote free cash, which can be spent for things like capital improvements, like retroactive raises if it takes you 3 years to negotiate a union contract, extraordinary items. So most communities across the state, you try to have a decent free cash balance. The town of Kingston, beginning in 2015 and ending in 2020, the year that we just completed, we've had an average free cash balance of $2,400,000, which comes to about 4.7% of our current, the prior year's operating budget. So that's a fairly strong position, and it's something that you try to maintain to be able to take care of emergencies, to be able to provide a funding source for capital improvements, etc. If I look across the same 15 towns again, the average balance is $1.9 million. So Kingston has been stronger than the average. They've been stronger than a lot of the other towns. There are a couple of towns that have average balances higher than Kingston, specifically Duxbury and Situate. Again, the communities that have more high-value homes and more affordability. Hanover tends to have a very strong position, and I think Hanover benefits from the significant amount of non-residential tax property that they have in town, the commercial businesses that they have allowed. And if I'm allowed a bit of an editorial, another reason why Kingston has to find ways to accept some commercial projects and not fight and defeat every commercial project that comes down the pike, so to speak. That's kind of, I think, all I need to say on free cash. The last item I have here is Stabilization Fund. All communities in Massachusetts are encouraged to maintain a so-called Stabilization Fund, which allows you to be able to do things when it may be either an emergency, a one-time thing that you really have to dig in and use something. As an example, the state of Massachusetts has a stabilization balance, I believe, of like $3.8 billion. And there is talk of perhaps using some of that to reduce the reduction that they're going to have to send to the states in state aid. That I think that to the communities, I think that there's no doubt that state aid is going to be decreased this next year. How much of it's going to be decreased is the great question that we all are suffering with. But Kingston has increased their stabilization fund balance from $1.7 million back in 2014 to I believe now it's at somewhere around $2.5 million to $2.6 million maybe. We try to put away, $100,000 or thereabouts each year to try to increase it. It's what the common person has probably always heard of as the rainy day fund, that, having some money available, should there ever be the need. We've actually, I think the town officials here, we've looked at, using some of that this year, but one of the concerns is that fiscal year 2022, which begins, a year from now, a lot of people are projecting that could be even worse than the current fiscal year of 21 that we're trying to budget for right now. So a conservative approach says that we try to maintain the stabilization balance. We may not be able to increase it, but we'd like to maintain it. The same as the free cash, perhaps, maintain more free cash than we normally would by buying less capital, by using it for less things. The stabilization balance, again, is an indication of Kingston's financial strength, the conservativeness that the average that we're seeing in Kingston is pretty close to the average for the 15 communities, although you see in stabilization funds much more variance, so that you see a community like East Bridgewater, which I would have never thought until I did this study. They have a reserve balance of $6 million. So some of the others are more like you'd expect. For instance, Duxbury has $5 million. So that, and then some like Hull has 400,000. Halifax only 700,000. So you see more of a variance in stabilization funds, because that's something that you tend to try to provide a growth to that when you can, but if budgets are tight, you tend not to spend much there. So that's kind of what I had to try to discuss the overall situation that we find ourselves in with the budgets. I do believe strongly that the financial management of Kingston over the last 7 or 8 years that I've been involved, and probably another 5 years or more before that, has been quite conservative over that period of time. I think that the services provided for the taxes that people pay are, you know, exceptional in many cases. I think that the real estate taxes that we all pay are as reasonable as you're going to find in Eastern Massachusetts. A lot of the parameters say that we're average. I can't say that we have the lowest taxes around, but I certainly do not believe we have the highest taxes either. That it's something that we have to recognize that if we want the services of the excellent education system, the police and fire, the protections, the services that we offer to the seniors, to the recreational services to the youth of this town, the library services, that these all come at an expense. And I encourage people who really believe the taxes are too high, look at some of the detail and suggest where you believe there could be reductions. And I think that the town management is always looking at things, trying to do things more effectively, more efficiently. Some things now are being outsourced that can be done at a more reasonable cost. All in all, I'm proud to say that I have been part of the financial management team here and intend to continue that way. I hope that many people come to the town meeting, take some time to study the budgets. If anybody has any questions specific on the budgets, you can call me, you can call Carol. We're all willing to answer specific questions and provide the detail. With that, I have nothing else unless somebody online here wants to ask a question. I'll turn it back to Carol.
Thank you, Carl. So I would like to open it up if the two other people on this call or on this meeting have any questions. We'd be happy to help.
Hey guys, it's Mary McKinnon.
Hi, Mary.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Is that Jim? I'm
yes,
on the phone. I can't see who's on there. All right. We're diehards. So I have a comment and then I have a question. First off, I want to thank both of you guys for spending the time to put this together, and I certainly hope that when the recording gets posted that people do take advantage of watching this and listening to all of the wealth of information that was just provided. And I think you did a fantastic job of putting a lot of our financial variables into some context for people to understand and appreciate. So thank you very much for all the time and effort that you put into this. My comment in addition to that is that I would like to encourage people who do listen to this particular recording to also take some time to listen to the Finance Committee meeting that took place last night. It was our final public hearing on our last review of the budget, and we had some good conversations about a lot of things, not the least of which was a conversation regarding excess levy capacity, which I think is a really important component of the FY21 budget this year. And I encourage people to take a listen to that, and if they have any questions, to let us know. But my big question, and with respect to the FY21 budget, is what kind of impact will homeowners, residential taxpayers expect to see in terms of an impact on their tax bill over FY20?
Well, it's a good question because it's all, as you know, relative to value. So we know that values are going up. I don't know how much Meredith is working on that, every day. So it's hard to say. I could say between, it could be anything. It could be $50 to $100 per taxpayer, per bill. I don't know. I just don't know. It's really too early to determine that because we just don't know what the values are coming in at.
Mm-hmm. Have you guys tried to use the DLS impact calculator that uses sort of a standard value. So if we know our values are going up, but we assume sort of they're going up proportionally, there's an impact calculator out there that you can use to give you a range of what the tax impact is going to be of a new budget.
I was looking at that yesterday. I did not get an opportunity to finish looking at it as far as putting in the numbers. But I do hope to have something for town meeting for that.
Okay. All right. I'm happy to help you with that, Carol, if you know, looking at some things that sometimes don't always look right when you first look at them. My other thing is I just want to just raise the point, and it was a part of our conversation last night, that although we are prepared to bring forward an FY21 budget to the voters of the town of Kingston at town meeting, that I want people to understand that budget is not entirely complete. We know that, you know, there's always moving targets once you set a budget, because a budget's just a plan. It's not an exact science, but there's a couple of big components that are still not done, and that is contract negotiations. And we have a number of unions that still have open contracts that expired on June 30th. So although we have a budget to bring forward to town meeting and we're talking about that impact, I want people to be aware that there's going to be an additional impact, more than likely, when we finish the budget process at our fall special town meeting. And I think people don't really understand that you actually take 2 bites at the budget, once at the annual and once at the special. So when people are looking at things, I just want them to understand that there's going to be additional impacts.
That's true if the contract negotiations hopefully go as planned and they actually come to an agreement. So that would be nice.
Okay, perfect.
And the one thing that I'll add to that is both a citizen, resident of Kingston, and a, part of the financial management team here in town, is that I certainly will be encouraging us all to find ways to offset any new expenditures, so that if we have budget increases, as Mary mentions, for union settlements, then I will be strongly working and encouraging others to propose or to be proponents of finding other reductions to offset that. That I think this is a year that it's an extraordinary year, and when we come in with this kind of a budget, I believe we have to try to live with that budget. And if that means that, because of a union increase or because of its other expenditures required for some reason or another, then I will be challenging people to say, hey, where do we make reductions to offset that?
Mm-hmm. Perfect. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, Jim, you're up.
Hey, Mary, thank you. I'm just going to, I was only going to echo what you were saying, and you did ask the 2 questions that I had. So I appreciate the answers, and I appreciate both Carl and Carol, what you've done to present this to the public. And, Carl, like, as you just said, this is going to be a moving target, especially in this climate. And we will be challenged to make reductions if some unexpected expenses come along. And I think we all should just be prepared for that, given the current climate.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
I wish that folks who tend to have questions regarding the budget on town meeting floor, I wish they were participating in this process, because you've got, access to a number of resources here who can answer those questions.
And it always helps to have questions wherever you are in life, to have questions, a week in advance or a few days in advance, as opposed to having to try to field questions at the spur of the moment when you don't always have all the resource documents in front of you that can help.
Agreed. And especially with this town meeting, where we're hoping to sort of have expedited conversations so as to not prolong town meeting, given, the circumstances. So we will hope for the best.
I also would encourage you, if you have the time, and I know you guys are all busy, but I've been watching the Pembroke town meeting from last evening, and it's well run. Their moderator is doing a pretty good job. I'm probably about maybe a third of the way through it. But it gives you a pretty good framework for what's going on. And again, they're facing the same problems we are. Just if you are looking for something to do or looking for some more information in terms of just the formulation of it, I strongly suggest you go on YouTube and look at the Pembroke Town meeting from last evening.
I found another
Thanks,
town
Jim.
meeting junkie.
I would encourage anyone that either listens to this or the Finance Committee meeting, if anybody has any questions, we're here to answer them. As far as the financials go. But if you have any questions on any of the articles, give the department a call. That's it.
All right, everyone, I'm ready to sign off if everyone else is.
I am. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Carol.
Have a good night.
Good night now.
Good night.